morning, everybody. We are live on Facebook and we've got people coming in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kim McClellan. I am the FAAR Public Policy Director, and we've done a meeting like this a few years ago. It was very popular. I think a lot of agents are surprised when they get into the business to find that almost every jurisdiction has varying rules on signs. Where can you put them? How many can you put out? How big can they be? What happens if they get taken? What's enforcement like? And this does vary from county to county, so it can get complicated. So we wanted to go ahead and have another great meeting with some of our zoning administration folks to talk about what the sign rules in each of the jurisdictions are. So I'm so thankful that we have several of our jurisdictions joining us this morning. This is going to be broadcast live on Facebook, so if any of your colleagues in your office missed it and didn't get the information, they can always go back and watch it. I'm also going to do a blog post that covers some of the highlights that we'll talk about today, and I will link to the individual actual ordinance language for each of the jurisdictions. So if you forget moving forward and you're about to go list a house in Spotsylvania County, you can quickly access that information. So with that, I'm just going to start here in alphabetical order if I can. I know we were going to have somebody from Caroline County join. Do we have someone from Caroline on the phone or on the call? All right, well, we will come back to Caroline. I see Marnie with the city of Fredericksburg. So I'm going to have each jurisdiction give a little overview of what their specific rules are. If there's questions while we're talking, please feel free to send them to me in the chat or do a hand raise and I can call on you. Since it is specific by jurisdiction, I will take questions after each one is done so you don't forget if you heard one 20 minutes ago. So we will start with the city of Fredericksburg. So Marnie, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marnie Sherman. I'm the city's development administrator. And one of my jobs is to manage our sign regulations and our sign permits. And so thank you to Kim for bringing me back for another update. Our rules have changed since 6 years ago, but mainly to address Supreme Court ruling, which told jurisdictions that they could no longer regulate signage by what it says, by the content that's within the signs. And the city of Fredericksburg, like most jurisdictions around the nation, gave exemptions for real estate signs or signs offering a property for sale or for rent. I mean, banners that advertised a sale. We were very specific and used common sense. Some signs should just be allowed. But because of the Supreme Court ruling several years ago, all of that content-based material had to be removed from the city's ordinance. And so now it's a little bit more vague, but the city does still hold a pretty tight rein on its signage. It's one of the more restrictive codes in the area in regard to temporary signs. There's a certain level of aesthetic that the city requires in managing its signs. And so I will tell you the sign ordinance sections so that you guys can refer back to them. The two main ones I'd want to point out are Section 72-59.3, which talks about the city's exempted signs. These are signs, with the exception of if you're in the historic district, that don't require zoning permits for the most part. And then Section 72-59.4 regulates prohibited signs. And so generally, the city prohibits most temporary signs. It also regulates and says you should not put signs that are off premise, with the exception of a couple cases. So if you're advertising a property for sale, you can't have an open house sign at the corner. The only signs that are allowed that I think you guys probably are most interested in that don't require a permit is again in that exempted section, and it's section F. So it's 72-59.3F specifically. And there are 3 cases when temporary signs are allowed to go up without a permit. The first is on property with an active building permit. You can have one sign up to 6 square feet in area and up to 6 feet in height if it's a freestanding sign. Otherwise, it's just 6 feet in area if you're putting it on your building, in any residential or planned development residential district. In any other district, you're allowed to have a sign up to 32 square feet in size and 8 feet in height, again, if it's freestanding. So that's, what some people use it for, although we don't say what it has to be used for, is if you have an active building permit, a lot of people will use this to advertise that they're doing the site work. or that it's a new neighborhood and one particular builder is working in there. But again, we don't regulate what it has to say. The second one, on a property for sale or for rent, you can have one sign up to 6 square feet in area, again, and 6 feet in height if freestanding in those R and PDR districts. And then the same regulations if you're in any other district. You can have a sign up to 32 square feet in area and 8 feet in height if you're freestanding in any other district. And again, a lot of people use this to advertise that a property is for sale or for rent. Number 3, beginning 60 days before a federal, state, or local primary, general, or special election and ending 10 days after that election, additional signs are allowed on private property. And so those are really the 3 main cases when temporary signs are permitted. The other thing I'll just point out in our prohibited section is you can never use balloons, feather flags, anything that flashes or blinks, no stationary balloons, inflatable devices, streamers, pennants, any of those things, all of those things rather are prohibited in our section 7259.4C. And so I do get a lot of questions of what happens with my signs. And if they're in the public right away, they get picked up and immediately discarded. The city is a very small, we have a very small city hall and a very small city shop. And so we just don't have room to keep them and manage them and return them. And so those quickly do get discarded as soon as we get them. And then if it's a one-off, you know, we'll probably just pick up your signs and be done with it. If it's something that it's a repeat offender, we'll start sending out notices or calling up those offenders to let them know, you know, in case you weren't aware, we don't allow those in the city of Fredericksburg. And then if it gets bad enough, then we would have to go to court and all that stuff. But generally that's not, or that is never our goal. Our goal is compliance, never punishment or consequence or any of that stuff. So, and then we have, of course, our sign ordinance that allows signs with various zoning permits. So happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, so I just want to reiterate and confirm temporary signs. So those directionals that realtors use a lot are not allowed in any case, unless, I don't know that we have that many of these properties here, but if it is on private property, if you have a neighbor who says, sure, you can put a directional in my yard, is that acceptable?
So in the prohibited section, it does discuss anything that's off premise. And so you're really only allowed to have the one sign on the property that is for sale or for rent, if that's the category of temporary signs you're using.
And if you are having an open house, so you have the for sale sign in the front yard, for the day of the open house on that individual property, can you add balloons to the mailbox or the lamppost or an open house sign in the front yard that indicates this house is open today from 12 to 3?
So again, I read that prohibited code section. You are prohibited from using balloons and banners and things like that. And I will reiterate what the code allows in terms of temporary signage. If it's on your property, I probably have better things to do than hassle you about something on that day, assuming, again, it doesn't have the balloons and banners and all that stuff. So just try to keep it on your property is what I would say.
Okay. All right. I did want to ask, I don't know if this necessarily pertains to real estate, but have you relaxed any of the rules because of the coronavirus? I don't know if anybody's representing businesses who might have questions or somebody who's looking to buy a business.
Right. And so the city council did take action to recognize that we are in a crisis and that you can use those temporary sign rules that I went over. I think that the date was extended now. It would be 10 days from now, actually, would be when that would expire. The state code and the emergency codes really limited the jurisdictions from like creating brand new rules. So we're really just reminding businesses of the existing rules and encouraging them to put up banners if they need to inform their public.
I had a question in the chat. What about a permit to post additional signage?
So then we would just look at whatever the zoning district is, and yes, a permit could be issued in accordance with whatever the zoning regulations are in that zoning district. In residential zoning districts, if that's what you're specifically asking about, very limited amount of signage is allowed in residential zones. But certainly, if you're in a commercial zone and you apply for a permit, we would approve it if it complied with the code.
And then from an enforcement perspective, does the city conduct proactive enforcement, driving around and pulling things? Is it complaint driven? How does that enforcement process work?
We are proactive. I do pick up signs on a regular basis, even on weekends. And then we have some volunteers who do that, as well as other city employees in public works. We get a lot of complaints. People in the city really care about signs.
Okay. Any agents on the call, on the phone? Anybody have any other questions for Marnie? And if you think of one later, just pop it in the chat and I'll make sure that we ask it. I'm gonna check Facebook. I don't see any questions there. All right, well, Marnie, I think we're good for now. If we have any other follow-up questions, we'll come back to you. But I'm gonna see, is there anybody on the line from Caroline County?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, we can. Good morning, nice to see you.
You as well. Sorry, my computer had to update, so I was a little late.
Nope, that is fine, no problem. We just skipped ahead and went to the city of Fredericksburg. So Caroline County, I'm guessing the rules are gonna look a little different down there. What are the sign rules in your jurisdiction?
So when it comes to real estate signs, anything in the yard of the house is permitted, as long as it's temporary. Obviously, 6 months, take it down, put it back up later. We don't want anything up there for a year or two trying to sell one house. For open houses, we don't mind if you put a sign out in the morning saying open house this way, take it down when the open house is closed, with most of them happening on weekends. But if they're up for more than one day, then we will, come and send you a letter saying that you need to remove the sign. When it comes to other off-site directional signs, anything off-site signs requires a permit. The sign can't be any larger than 25 square feet, and we need to see an agreement with you and the other property owners stating that you're allowed to put your sign there. And when that sign goes onto an off-site location, then all signage associated with that location is taken into account. So properties are only allowed to have one monument or freestanding sign. And so if you were to use the gas station on the corner and they had a sign displaying their prices, you would not be able to put up another freestanding sign there. You would have to attach your sign to their sign, and it would go into their total sign calculation. So they would have to have less than 32 square feet of signage on that existing sign for you to be able to fit into their square footage. If it was a vacant property, then off-site sign would be fine, because that would be the monument sign on that property. You're allowed 25 square feet for one of those signs, and you're allowed a total of 100 square foot of off-site signage. So you could put up 4 or 5 of those off-site signs, but again, we would need a lease agreement and a fee for each one of those signs, and we have to take into account the total signage of the property. But that's really basically our 3 main rules on the real estate signs.
Okay, Craig, I have a follow-up question on directionals. When you're saying directionals for an open house day, is that something they can put in the right of way and it's not enforced, or just on the property that is for sale?
You could put it off site and say open house this way. We do not have manpower in Caroline to drive around and pull signs. Everything would be complaint driven, and so we would have to get a complaint, and then we would follow up with the owner of the sign to ask them to remove the sign. However, VDOT does pull signs in the right of way in Caroline County if they happen to see one, and they have Caroline County's permission to pull any signs that are in the right of way. So it's not necessarily Caroline County enforcement that pulls those. It's more or less VDOT when they're driving through the area, or if they call us sometimes when they see signs for new neighborhoods or new houses that are in the right of way and ask us if we're okay with them pulling them, and our answer is yes most of the time. So we're not going to regulate that, but they very well could be pulled up by VDOT.
And is there any recourse if your signs are taken by VDOT? Do you have any recourse to get them back?
You would have to talk to VDOT about that. I'm not sure about that. If we go out to pull one, then we'll contact you and say, hey, we have your sign. We asked you to take it down. You didn't take it down. And so, but I'm not sure how long our zoning technician keeps those. We don't have a bin or a building or anything like that. And so if it's longer than a couple days, then it's probably going to be discarded.
So we had a comment on Facebook from one of our members that said it's not unique in the city. People like to complain. That happens everywhere. Do you see a lot of complaints in Caroline County? Does the zoning office get a lot of calls about signs?
Not about signs. We very rarely have calls about signs. We'll get a couple a year. I'd say no more than 20 or so calls about signs a year. And again, we send the person a letter and ask them to come remove their sign. That's always the first course of action. We can go to court, as Fredericksburg said, but most of the time we find compliance in writing the letter and having the sign removed.
Okay. Well, congratulations, Caroline County agents. You are being very compliant then. Anybody have any questions before I let Craig off the hook and switch over to King George? And if you think of one after, no problem, just pop it in the chat and we'll go back. All right, thank you, Craig. Now we're going to be moving over to Lewis with King George County. Welcome, Lewis.
Hi, I'm Lewis Pancotti. I'm the planner for King George. And so our ordinance, our sign ordinance is pretty similar to City of Fredericksburg. The two that apply to you guys would be same as with Fredericksburg under the exempted from permit requirement section, which is 3.11.3, particularly items C and D. So C states that real estate signs pertaining only to the sale or lease of the lot or structure on the lot on which the sign is erected are permitted in all districts. Only one such sign shall be permitted on every lot except lots in excess of 10 acres may have a maximum of 2 such signs. And the maximum size for the signs is 32 square feet, except in residential zoning districts, the signs are limited to 6 square feet. But again, there's no permit required for those. Then also, we do permit a 32 square foot sign, or contractor sign, that can be located on a lot on which has an open building permit. But once the work is completed, the sign has to be removed. And just like with City of Fredericksburg under our prohibited signs, it does prohibit anything that has parts that are in motion or fluttering or rotating or any other moving type of sign.
Okay, Lewis, what about directional signs? So obviously King George is a pretty rural county. There's going to be homes that are off the beaten path. Are they permitted to put up directionals on the day of an open house?
So currently off-premise signs, even regardless of content, even if it is just an arrow, are not permitted. Only signs have to be on the lot that is for sale.
Okay, and how does the county's enforcement work? Is it like Fredericksburg where you're proactively picking up, or is it like Caroline where you're complaint driven?
Closer to Caroline, we, like Caroline, don't really have the manpower to go patrolling out for signs, and it's mostly complaint driven.
Do you also have an agreement with VDOT to pick up signs in the right of way?
We don't actively pick signs often. We do on occasions. It's not that we never do, but we do have a similar agreement where we can pick up signs in the right of way.
Okay, any questions for Lewis before we move on? All right, well, Lewis, thank you. I see Kimberly is on from Spotsylvania County. We can get her to unmute and maybe start the video. We will switch over to Spotsylvania. Kimberly, are you there? I see her name on the screen. All right, well, why don't we see if someone from Stafford is on the call. Anybody from?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm James Staranovich. I'm one of the zoning permit reviewers for Stafford
James.
County.
Thanks for joining us.
And I basically handle all the commercial and sign permits that come in through the county. I got thrown into this yesterday, so I'm not really prepared as well as some of the others. But as far as the real estate signs, we do allow them. Looking here, those do not require permits from our standpoint. They can only have a sign up to 32 square feet in area. It could be on the property for up to 60 days. And no more than 2 60-day periods within a calendar year. So you figure a couple months here, a couple months there, but that's about it. That's about all they get. As far as our minor directional signs, signs pointing towards the open house or something like that. As long as it's under 6 square feet, we don't really do anything with those. As long as they're not in the right of way, they can post it on the side of the road, just as long as it's outside the right of way area. We do, let's see, what else was there?
What about the enforcement process?
The enforcement portion of it, we do enforce. We do have 2 zoning inspectors that will go out and pull signs from the right of way. They will do it on a proactive basis or on a complaint-driven basis, depending on how it comes in. So we do it either way. As far as the signs being, I mean, they do check the signs off-site. Our off-premise signs usually will have to have owner approval. We'll have to have an agreement between the owner and the person putting the sign up before we allow it to go in. But they're, as far as the signs in the right of way, they will pick them up.
Okay. So we worked extensively with Stafford probably 3 or 4 years ago when there was a proposal to really restrict temporary signs. Anything that was up for longer than 60 days would have required a sign permit. And this obviously never went into effect. This was a proposal. It's just something which, even in the current environment, I mean, Stafford has incredibly low inventory and homes are really flying off the market. Even then, 60 days can be a stretch for home sellers. So we worked extensively with a couple of the supervisors at the time to get that exemption for signs under 6 feet, 6 feet and smaller for homes for sale, because it is a big tool. I mean, yes, people start their searches online, but that sign in the yard is an important tool and an important symbol for our members. So thank you to Stafford for working with us. And I have not heard any complaints from Stafford agents since we were able to work that out. So I think that, we definitely, we hit on something that worked for agents. I don't know if anybody on the call has anything different to say in terms of signs, but we are pleased that and I'm sure the zoning department is pleased too, that you don't have hundreds of realtors coming to you a month for permits for the sign in the front yard. So
well, yeah, I am definitely happy. I am definitely happy about that, because I'd have to look at each and every one of them.
Right. And then you'd have some angry citizens who, if they didn't get it quickly, they want their house to go up for sale. We want to get that sign in the yard. So yeah. Thank you. Any questions for Stafford? All right. Well, James, thank you for picking this up last minute. We appreciate it. And we'll also link to the Stafford zoning ordinance so that we can put that information out to our members. So let's see if Kimberly is on. I did send her an email that, I don't know if she's having technical problems. Oh, there we go.
Hey everyone, this is Kimberly Pomato with Spotsylvania County. I'm the zoning administrator. We do not have a webcam, so bear with me, I'm a blank screen.
That's okay, we can hear you and that's what's important. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
So, the sign ordinance for the county can be found in section 25-5.8. And Spotsylvania County, we're lagging behind just a little bit to bringing our ordinance into compliance with the content-based regulations that Marnie mentioned at the beginning. So I can tell you we are going through a code amendment, and we're trying to get this to the board as soon as possible. But so everything we'll talk about with these exempt permits, what you'll see in our code now is that they are very content-based. It specifically references real estate signage. You will see that again in the code amendment. It's just not going to be phrased quite this way. So for your real estate signage, you're permitted to have no more than 2 on any single lot, and they cannot be any more than 6 square feet each. From a enforcement standpoint, we also have an agreement with VDOT to enforce signage within the right-of-way. There is no signage permitted in the right-of-way. Our code has always reflected that, but the county did not always enforce that. In fact, there was a policy up until February of this year where the board had an enforcement policy which allowed signage to be within the right-of-way over the weekends, and the time frame was from noon on Fridays to noon on Mondays. But that exception created a lot of headaches. It wasn't just real estate signage, it was business signage, and it became an enforcement nightmare. The board started receiving complaints, and so they ended up in February amending their enforcement policy where there is no exception any longer. And so that's probably something new that may have not been transmitted to all of your agents yet. We do not enforce proactively. We don't have the staff to do that. However, we do partner with our litter control team, and while they were not picking up signage proactively before that enforcement policy was amended in February, they have started doing proactive sweeps. Primarily, they're doing those on our main corridors, Route 3, Route 1, Courthouse Road, Route 208. Now, as far as have we relaxed any of that right now through COVID, I would say we have not been given any direction to relax that, but it's probably just a consequence, though, of some staffing shift rotations, that we're doing now in response to COVID. Did I miss anything, Kim?
Nope, I think that's great. So I think the big thing, the big change for members, and we certainly heard a little bit about this back in the winter, was the enforcement. And Spotsylvania really had been sort of the only county that officially had a policy to not enforce from Friday noon to Monday. And it's something that our agents do, and our agents are very split. I was in a meeting once where there's a group of people who say directionals have kind of gone out the window. Everybody has GPS on their phone, on their car. They don't really need it anymore. And then I have agents who say, absolutely not. I get business off of those signs. So it really just depends on the business model, where people are selling. Certainly, we probably see directionals more in a rural setting than we do, even though I live in Idlewild in the city and I see signs all the time. So, it's just the preference of the agents and where you are. But I know we see them more in a rural area. So I think the enforcement was really the big change to Spotsylvania's ordinance. And so I know it wasn't in effect for very long before COVID struck, but are you seeing a reduced amount of complaints since you have changed that guidance?
Not necessarily. We have a high number of sign complaints on a regular basis.
Yeah. So any of our members want to weigh in on the sign debate? Because I know this is a tough one for us. On one hand, I don't feel like the realtors are the problem. We put up a few signs to get people to open houses, but as a resident, when you're driving on our corridors sometimes and you see dozens of signs, it is an aesthetic, consideration, I understand, going forward. So do we have any agents who might want to weigh in on their use or not using of directionals? I know we still sell a lot of them here at FAAR, so they're going somewhere. Nobody uses them. I see.
Sorry, I was slow on the
Oh,
unmute.
that's okay. Go ahead.
So,
Lynn.
I do use the directional signs, and I do get business off of the directionals. I can put up signs without even advertising an open house for an open house and get people.
So it's a business tool.
I
It's a
mean, I
business
find
tool.
them in mainly regular residential areas, so not out in the county. I'm less likely to use them way out in the county because
Okay.
they'd have to be so far apart. But I'm also adamant about putting them out right before the open house and removing them immediately after the open house. So
Sure.
don't let them drag out over time.
So have you personally or any agents that you know of had their signs removed as part of the changes in enforcement, or?
Not recently, when Spotsylvania County started really cracking down on signs in the park areas, they were removed. So, and we were told if they showed up again, we would be fined. So this was quite a few years back. So I've never done it again after that, but I still see them. So, because I live near park areas for Spotsy, and I do still see them out there.
Yeah. Okay.
They're necessary for me when I have an open house. So
Let's see. I have a comment in the Facebook chat. Let's see. We have a agent who's just saying that it's not about getting business, it's about promoting the sellers and drawing attention of potential buyers to that house. Well, I think for me, really, this was about getting you all the information. We want you to know the law, know where to go, know those rules. So it really sounds like they're fairly similar. You know, the city certainly is probably the most proactive on it. But, you know, when I tell my new agents in orientation, directionals are almost always not going to be allowed. And they're really not allowed in the right of way anytime, you know, according to VDOT. Especially when you have signs that are restricting sight lines when you're driving. I mean, those are going to be taken down and removed. So important that we know and understand the rules. We will make sure that we send out a follow-up with all of the different ordinances. And also, if you have a question, if you're reading through it and saying, I don't understand how this applies to me, I don't want to speak for our folks on the phone, but I'm sure that if you give the zoning office a call, they will be happy to walk you through, okay, this is the kind of property you have, this is what you want to do, it's allowed or it's not allowed, and here's what you can do to bring your signs into compliance. Because we certainly don't want to be in a position where we have agent signs that can cost a lot of money getting taken. We want you to know the rules and know how to comply. So if there are no further questions, I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. I don't want to cut anybody off, but are there any questions for any of our speakers from any of our jurisdictions? If not, all right, I see one. So yes, I had a question saying, can we get a list of the contact numbers? I will link to the zoning offices for everybody, and I'll reach out to all the speakers to make sure that I get the right number for you all to call. So that's a great question. We'll send that out to all the attendees, and I'll also put it in a blog post so you can share it with members in your office. So thank you to all of our speakers. I really appreciate your time today, and hopefully you will get some outreach so that we can make sure that we're putting up our signs where they should be and following all the rules. So thank you, everybody. I'm getting lots of thumbs up and thank yous. Everybody have a great rest of your week.